People think wealth is loud, but the first thing I noticed when I stepped into the Vale Ridge mansion was the silence. Not peaceful silence, strategic silence, the kind that swallows inconvenient truths before they reach the chandelier. The house smelled of polished wood and expensive tea. My suitcase wheels made a small, disrespectful sound across the marble, and every servant's gaze slid away as if eye contact could be audited. At the center of the foyer, a family portrait hung like a verdict. Father in a navy suit, mother in pearls, brother with a lazy smile, and in the middle, a girl with dimples and a halo of perfectly styled hair. The plaque read, "The Ashfords." The girl was Lila Ashford, their daughter except she wasn't, and I was. My name was Rowan Ashford on paper, but everyone had trained their tongues to forget it. "Welcome home," Mother said, and her voice carried the same warmth as a refrigerated display case. Father nodded once, like a CEO acknowledging a junior analyst. My brother, Kieran, looked me up and down and stored the result somewhere between annoyance and boredom. Then Lila rushed forward with a gasp and wrapped her arms around me, as if she had been waiting her whole life for my return. "Sister," she cried. Her eyes were bright, her lips trembling, her act flawless. If performance were oxygen, she could have kept this entire house alive. That was when the sound started soft at first, like a radio turning on in another room. A girl's voice, sweet and trembling, bloomed inside my head. Not spoken out loud, not whispered, thought, "I should look kind," the voice said. "If I look kind, they won't hate me." I froze. The thought wasn't mine, and it wasn't private. It echoed through the room the way a confession echoes through a cathedral. Father's brows lifted. Mother's hand tightened around her clutch. Kieran's smile faltered. Lila kept hugging me, but her inner voice continued, syrupy and calculated. "Rowan will be grateful," it said. "She'll accept whatever I give her. She'll look small, and I'll look generous." I realized, with a chill that had nothing to do with air conditioning, that everyone could hear it. Everyone had always heard it. This family lived with a curse they pretended was a blessing. Thoughts that leaked at dramatic moments. The kind of thing tabloids would call destiny. They called it the chorus. They claimed it made them honest. In reality, it made them manipulable. Lila had learned to weaponize it the way some people weaponize tears. I had learned, in a foster home where truth was a luxury, to listen for the parts that didn't match. The chorus had never belonged to me before, but now it hummed at the edge of my skull like an unlocked door. I could hear Lila's thoughts clearly, and even stranger, I could touch them, like text in a document waiting to be edited. The sensation wasn't magical fireworks. It was mundane, like dragging a cursor. I didn't know why I could do it. I only knew I could. Lila released me and stepped back, hands clasped like a saint. "I took your life," she said aloud, voice breaking. "So, I want to give you something back." A servant carried in a velvet box and opened it to reveal a sleek, matte black card. I recognized it from rumors and late-night luxury forums. An international access card tied to a private trust. The kind of card that didn't beep when it approved purchases, it simply obeyed. "This is the Zenith card," Lila announced, eyes shining for the audience. "It can be used anywhere, for anything. It's yours, Rowan." The room held its breath. Mother's lips parted. Father's gaze sharpened, calculating the optics. Kieran's eyes flicked to me, daring me to refuse and look ungrateful. Lila's inner voice rose again, soft as poison. "She can't refuse," it said. "If she refuses, she will look greedy anyway. If she accepts, I will look noble. Either way, I win." I looked at the card, then at Lila's face, and felt the cursor in my mind settle on her thought like a fingertip on a keyboard. I didn't want money. I wanted the truth to stop being optional. I smiled, small and polite, and let my fingers brush the velvet box as if I were hesitant. "I can't accept something like this," I said softly. Lila's eyes widened, not because she cared, but because she hadn't predicted defiance. The chorus paused, waiting for her next mental performance. I edited. I added one line to her inner voice, slipping it in like a stitch. "If she doesn't accept," Lila's thought now whispered, "it means she rejects me, and I'll prove my sincerity by going to the rooftop and bleeding for it." The words echoed into the room with the force of an alarm. Mother gasped. Father's jaw tightened. Kieran's hand shot out as if he could physically catch a thought before it fell. Lila froze, her smile stuck on her face, her eyes flickering with confusion because she hadn't thought that except everyone had heard it anyway, And in this house, what was heard became what was believed. Mother lunged for the card like it was a life preserver, snatched it from Lila's hands, and shoved it toward me. "Rowan," she said quickly, voice trembling. "Take it. Don't refuse your sister's heart." I lowered my lashes to hide the laugh that wanted to escape. "It's too precious," I murmured, letting my voice shake. Kieran scoffed. "Stop acting," he snapped. "If you want it, take it." Father cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the scene. "This is a family matter," he said, which in his language meant, "This is a public matter we must manage privately." Lila's eyes darted to me, and for the first time, her inner voice wasn't sweet. It was sharp. "What did you do?" it hissed. I met her gaze and smiled with the calm of someone who had finally been handed a lever. "I accepted your generosity." I thought back, though the chorus didn't carry my thoughts yet. "Isn't that what you wanted?" That night, after the servants cleared the dinner plates and the mansion returned to its strategic silence, I sat in the guest room, my room, technically, though it still smelled like fresh paint and unfamiliar furniture. The Zenith card lay on the dresser like a captured weapon. The chorus was quiet, as if it only spoke when drama demanded it. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, black hair tied back, skin a shade darker than the family portrait, eyes that had learned to watch before they spoke. I was the real daughter in a story everyone thought they knew. I had been swapped at birth in a hospital scandal buried by money, raised by a foster couple who did their best until illness and bills crushed them, and then passed through the system like a file nobody wanted to process. I had worked at a diner, lived in a shared apartment with a leaky ceiling, and taught myself accounting by watching free lectures at night. I didn't come to this house for love. I came because the letter from a private investigator arrived like a stone through a window. Your blood family exists, and they are rich enough to buy consequences. I came because I wanted answers. I didn't expect to inherit a curse and a cursor. In the hallway outside my room, voices carried through the ornate walls. Mother's voice tight with worry. "What if she really? What if Lila?" Father's response, controlled. "She's being dramatic. She always is, but we can't risk a scandal." Kieran's laugh, harsh. "Rowan is going to ruin the house." She walked in and the first thing she did was make Lila cry. Their words tasted familiar. Blame the outsider for the tension she reveals. I closed my eyes and listened, not to their voices, but to the faint crackle of the chorus beginning to wake. Downstairs, Lila's thoughts surfaced again, softer now that she believed she was alone. "I need them," she thought. "I need the Ashfords to choose me. If they choose her, I disappear." The fear in her thought was real. But fear doesn't make someone innocent. It just makes them desperate. I had sympathy in the way you have sympathy for a knife that cuts because it was sharpened. The next morning, the mansion turned into a stage for reconciliation. Mother insisted we have breakfast together. Father pretended to read the news but watched our faces like a board meeting. Kieran tapped at his phone, looking bored, though his shoulders were tense. Lila arrived last in a cream sweater that made her look soft and harmless. She poured tea for me with trembling hands. Her inner voice rose on cue. "Be kind," it said. "Be gentle. If you are gentle, they will hate her for being sharp." I edited again, carefully. "The way you adjust seasoning you can't take back." I didn't change her whole thought. I added a splinter. "Be kind," the thought continued. "And if she doesn't forgive me, I'll tell them she bullied me, because tears always win." The room froze. Mother's spoon clinked against her bowl. Father's eyes narrowed. Kieran looked up sharply. Lila's hand jerked, tea spilling onto the tablecloth. She stared at the puddle like it had betrayed her. "Lila," Mother said, voice strained. "What do you mean?" Lila swallowed hard. Nothing." She stammered aloud. "I didn't mean..." Her cheeks flushed. She glanced at me with panic, and her inner voice screamed wordlessly. The chorus carried it anyway. A raw burst of confusion and fury. For the first time, Mother's gaze held hesitation when she looked at Lila. Not suspicion, yet this family didn't turn that easily, but the first hairline crack. I should have stopped there. I should have been satisfied with small cracks. But I had lived too long watching systems protect themselves. I knew how quickly cracks get patched if you don't widen them, so I made a plan, not like a villain, but like someone who had finally been given a tool and refused to use it passively. Step 1, gather proof. Step 2, separate love from obligation. Step 3, make myself unreplaceable, Not by begging, but by competence. In rich families, affection is negotiable. Utility is not. Father ran 2 companies, Ashford Capital, a financial conglomerate, and a quiet charity foundation that existed mostly for press releases. He didn't know I could read balance sheets the way other people read novels. He didn't know I had spent nights doing freelance bookkeeping for small businesses just to afford rent. When he mentioned, casually, that the foundation's annual gala was coming and the donors expected a flawless report, I offered, politely, "I can help." Kieran snorted. "You don't even know how this place works," he said. "Don't embarrass us." Father's mouth tightened. "Your brother is right," he said. "It's complicated." Lila's inner voice chimed in. Angelic. "Let her try," it said. "If she fails, they'll see she doesn't belong." I smiled. "I can learn," I said aloud. Then, quietly, I edited one word in Lila's thought, a tiny sabotage. "Let her try," it now said. "Because if she succeeds, I'll have to destroy her." The room cooled. Mother's fingers tightened on her napkin. Father's gaze sharpened again, but this time not at me. Kieran stared at Lila like he was suddenly seeing a stranger in a familiar dress. Lila's lips parted, and for a heartbeat, her mask slipped. Then she laughed awkwardly and said, "Rowan is just so eager." Her voice was syrup. Her eyes were knives. I nodded and took the foundation's files anyway. In the study that afternoon, I opened folders filled with numbers that were meant to intimidate the uninvited. I didn't flinch. I traced donations, expenditures, and consulting fees that looked suspiciously like money laundering disguised as philanthropy. The foundation wasn't just sloppy. It was risky. If regulators looked, the family would bleed. I could fix it. I could also expose it. The cursor in my mind felt heavier as I realized the power in my hands wasn't just about humiliating a fake sister. It was about choosing which truths to make loud. I exhaled slowly and decided I would save them from scandal, not because they deserved it, but because it would buy me leverage. And leverage was the only language this house respected. Over the next week, I worked like I was back in the diner, moving fast, thinking faster. I built a clean ledger, flagged questionable transactions, rewrote the report in plain language, and prepared questions for Father that would force him to make choices. Lila watched me from the doorway sometimes, smiling politely. Her inner voice whispered, "She's trying to be impressive." Then softer, "If she becomes useful, they might keep her." I didn't edit those lines. Fear that stays private can rot someone. Fear that becomes audible can change a room. I let the chorus do its work. The gala was held at a glass-walled museum overlooking the river. The city lights scattered across the water like 1,000 small lies. Donors arrived wrapped in designer fabric and self-congratulation. Mother wore a silver gown and a smile that could survive cameras. Father moved through the room like he owned the air. Kieran trailed behind him, handsome and bored, as if wealth were an illness he couldn't cure. Lila appeared in white lace, the kind of dress that made strangers assume innocence. Her inner voice floated gently, "I'm so grateful. I love this family." The chorus carried it, and people softened toward her like flowers turning to sun. I stood near the edge of the room in a simple black dress that fit properly because I bought it with my own money, not a stylist's opinion. I held the foundation report in a sleek folder. My hands were steady. When Father invited the donors' attention and began speaking about the year's impact, I watched the audience the way you watch a market waiting for shifts. Then I stepped forward when he nodded at me with the reluctant respect of someone who needed an expert. "We have achieved measurable outcomes," I began. Voice calm. I spoke in numbers and stories, in transparency and strategy. I explained where the funds went, why certain programs were trimmed, how the foundation would avoid risk. The room leaned in. People like clarity when it makes them feel safe. Father watched me, expression unreadable, but his shoulders had eased. When I finished, the applause was polite, then genuine. A donor's wife leaned toward Mother and said, loud enough for me to hear, "Your daughter is impressive." Mother's smile held, but her eyes flickered to me with surprise, like she had expected me to be a problem, not a solution. Kieran's gaze sharpened. Lila's inner voice cracked. "No," it whispered, thin with panic. "They're applauding her." After the speeches, Father pulled me aside near a sculpture that looked like a twisted crown. "You did well," he said. It was the closest he had come to praise. "Where did you learn that?" I shrugged. "Life," I replied. He stared at me, and for a moment I saw something in his face that could have been regret, but in men like him, regret is often just discomfort. He nodded and walked away before he had to feel it. Lila cornered me near the dessert table. Her smile was bright. Her eyes didn't blink. "You were amazing," she said softly. "I'm so proud of you." Her inner voice told the truth. "I hate you," it said. "I hate that they looked at you." I tilted my head. "Thank you," I said aloud. Lila's fingers brushed my wrist, as if we were sisters sharing warmth. "We should make peace," she murmured, "for the family." The chorus swelled, and I felt the cursor hover. Lila's thought continued, sweetly. "If she believes me, I can keep control." I edited, but not with cruelty this time, with precision. I added a line that would force her into her own spotlight. "If she believes me," her thought now declared, "I'll convince father to send her away quietly, because a real daughter is inconvenient." Lila looked like someone had yanked her heartbeat. Around us, a cluster of donors and staff turned their heads. Mother's friend, a senator's wife, froze mid-laugh. Mother, across the room, stared. Kieran's face turned cold. Father's gaze snapped toward us, sharp and dangerous. "What did you just think?" Kieran asked, voice low. Lila's eyes widened in horror. "I didn't," she whispered aloud. "I wouldn't." Her cheeks flushed. Her hands trembled. The chorus betrayed her. Because in this family, thoughts were treated as character evidence. Lila's mask fought to stay on. "It's the stress," she said quickly. "I'm overwhelmed." Father approached, posture controlled. "Enough," he said. "This is not the place." Then his gaze slid to me, as if wondering whether I had triggered it. He couldn't accuse me without admitting the house was vulnerable. He chose the safer target. "Lila," he said, "go get air." Lila fled toward the balcony. For a second, I hesitated. If she fell, the scandal would be mine, no matter what truth existed beneath it. I followed at a distance. On the balcony, the river wind whipped her hair loose. She gripped the railing with white knuckles and let her inner voice bloom for the entire room to hear. "If they don't love me," she thought, "I might as well die." The line was familiar now, a script she had used before. I watched her shoulders shake theatrically. A few guests murmured, alarmed. Mother rushed toward the balcony entrance, fear on her face like a brand. Father's jaw clenched. Kieran muttered something vulgar under his breath. I stepped beside Lila, close enough that only she could hear my breath. "You're not going to jump," I said softly. She stiffened. Her eyes flashed toward me. "You don't know that," she hissed aloud, then corrected herself with a sob. "I mean, I'm just so scared." Her inner voice screamed, "Stop talking. You're ruining my scene." I could have edited her thought again and made her look monstrous. I could have forced her to confess to everything. Instead, I chose a different weapon. Reality. I leaned in and murmured, "If you jump, they'll mourn you. Then they'll hate me forever. You'll still win." Lila's eyes widened. She hadn't considered that. She had been performing without analyzing the aftermath. For the first time, her fear shifted into something else, uncertainty. The chorus carried it like a crackling wire. "What if I don't win?" her thought whispered. "What if I disappear anyway?" Mother burst onto the balcony, tears in her eyes. "Lila, please," she pleaded. "Come inside." Father stood behind her, face rigid, calculating damage control. Kieran hovered, fists clenched. I stepped back and let the family do what families do when cornered. Choose the path that looks least shameful. Mother reached for Lila's hands and pulled her away from the railing. Lila collapsed into her arms, sobbing. Her inner voice whispered, "Hold me. Keep me." The room exhaled. People turned away, relieved. A crisis had been contained, not resolved. Later that night, after the donors left and the staff began cleaning up the evidence of luxury, Father called me into his office. The room smelled like leather and control. He sat behind a desk that had probably never been used for tenderness. "Rowan," he said, "you need to understand something. This family is fragile right now. We cannot afford chaos." He meant, "We cannot afford you." I met his gaze calmly. "Then stop feeding it," I replied. He frowned. "What do you mean?" I opened the foundation folder and slid it across the desk. "Your charity's old transactions are a ticking bomb," I said. "I fixed the report, but the underlying issues remain. If you want stability, you need reforms. Father's eyes narrowed as he scanned my notes. He looked irritated, then interested, then reluctantly impressed. You're ambitious, he said, as if ambition were a flaw in a woman. I smiled. I'm practical, I corrected. Ambition is what you call practicality when it isn't yours. He leaned back, studying me like a new asset. What do you want? He asked. That was the first honest question he had given me. I answered with equal honesty. I want a seat, I said, in the Foundation's management. And I want Lila's role defined, not emotional. If you keep pretending we're just sisters in a fairy tale, she'll keep using fear as currency. Father's gaze sharpened. He didn't like being told he had suffering under his roof, but he liked the idea of control. I'll consider it, he said. Don't push me. I left his office knowing what consideration meant in a man like him. Delay until the problem grows tired. I wouldn't grow tired. I had survived worse than delay. I also had the cursor, and Lila still didn't know how it worked. The next morning, Mother invited me to tea in the sunroom. Light poured through the glass like spilled forgiveness. Mother sat with her hands wrapped around a porcelain cup, shoulders stiff. She didn't apologize. She didn't know how. Instead, she said, "You did well last night." Her voice was careful. Your father was proud. The word sounded strange in her mouth. I looked at her, at the fine lines around her eyes, and felt a tug in my chest that I didn't trust. Was he? I asked quietly. Mother's gaze dropped. This is hard, she admitted, for all of us. She meant, for me because I'm guilty, for Lila because she's threatened, for the family image because it's messy. She didn't include me in her list because she still couldn't imagine I had feelings that mattered. I could have edited someone's inner voice then, but there was no chorus. This was just a mother and a daughter in a sunlit room, and the silence between them was heavier than any magic. I said gently, "It's hardest for the person who was missing." Mother flinched as if struck. She didn't reply, but her eyes watered, and for the first time, I saw her grief not as performance, but as consequence. I left the sunroom with a new understanding. Lila wasn't my only opponent. The entire family's denial was. If I includes only Lila, they could treat her as the problem. If I forced them to face their own choices, they would have to change. And rich people hate change more than they hate scandal. So I prepared my next move. I would take the foundation seat. I would restructure the finances. I would make myself essential. And when the time came, if Lila tried to burn me, I would let the chorus reveal the smoke. Ashford Capital's headquarters was a steel tower with a lobby that smelled like money and fresh flowers. On my first day as a temporary consultant for the foundation arm, security scanned my badge twice, not because it failed, but because the guard couldn't believe it. Kieran met me at the elevator with a frown. "This is a mistake," he said. "You don't belong here." I smiled politely. "You're right," I replied. "I belong in the room where decisions are made, not in the hallway where you complain." Kieran's nostrils flared. He wasn't used to being challenged by a sister. He was used to being challenged by competitors who respected the rules. I didn't respect the rules. I respected results. The foundation office was smaller, quieter, and filled with people who worked hard without being celebrated. They looked at me cautiously at first. I didn't blame them. In wealthy families, new faces often mean new violence. I did something simple. I listened. I asked where their processes broke, where their budgets got cut, where they feared audits. Then I fixed one small thing. I redesigned their reporting template so it didn't take 12 hours to compile monthly data. The staff looked at me like I had performed magic. I wanted to tell them it wasn't magic. It was care, and care was rare here. Word traveled upward. Father called me into a meeting with 3 directors who treated philanthropy as a brand extension. They asked me polite questions with sharp edges. I answered with numbers and calm. One director, an older man with silver hair, smirked and said, "You're very confident for someone who just arrived." I smiled. "Confidence is cheaper than insecurity," I said. "Insecurity costs companies millions." The room went quiet, then someone laughed, and the meeting shifted. When I left, Kieran waited in the hallway, expression tense. "You're enjoying this," he accused. "I'm surviving it," I corrected. "There's a difference." Lila visited the office 2 days later, wearing a pastel suit that made her look like an innocent intern. She arrived with coffee for the staff, smiles for the cameras, and a story about supporting her sister. The staff adored her in 5 minutes, because people adore anyone who looks gentle in a harsh world. Her inner voice floated as she handed me a cup. "Smile," it said. "Make her look like the cold one." I kept my smile neutral. I didn't edit. Not yet. I watched her. At lunch, in the cafeteria, Lila sat across from me as if we were friends. "You're doing well," she said, voice soft. "I'm glad." Her inner voice whispered, "I need to find her weakness." I sipped water and answered calmly, "Thank you." Lila leaned forward slightly. "Rowan," she said, "do you ever feel lonely coming into a family like this?" Her eyes gleamed with fake concern. Her inner voice pulsed, hungry. If she admits pain, I can use it. I met her gaze and said, "No." Lila blinked, thrown off balance. I continued, "I lived without this family for 21 years. Loneliness is not new. I'm trained." Lila's smile stiffened. That afternoon, a scandal landed like a brick. An investigative reporter published an article suggesting the foundation had misallocated funds. The article didn't name details, but it hinted at consulting fees and private trusts. Father called an emergency meeting. The directors panicked. Kieran slammed his fist on the table and demanded to know who leaked information. Lila sat with her hands folded, face pale, playing worried sister. Her inner voice screamed with delight. "It's working," it thought. "They'll blame Rowan. If they blame Rowan, she'll be expelled." I felt the cursor hover. I could have edited her thought into a confession and ended it, but I needed more than a confession. I needed the family to see the pattern, to feel the manipulation, to stop rewarding it. Father turned to me. "Did you talk to anyone?" he asked. The question was sharp enough to cut. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with an old anger. I had done the work, and still they assumed I was the risk. I placed my palms on the table and said, "No." Then I slid forward a folder containing my audit notes. "I told you weeks ago this was a bomb," I said calmly. "Here is the list of transactions that match the article's hints. Here is how we fix them. Here is how we contain the damage." The directors leaned in. The room shifted from accusation to survival. Father stared at my notes, and his face changed in slow increments: annoyance, recognition, reluctant respect. Kieran swallowed. "So she warned us," he muttered. Lila's inner voice surged, frantic now. "No, no, no," it thought. "She's useful. Useful means they keep her." The chorus wasn't active in the boardroom. It didn't always spill in public spaces, perhaps because even a curse has boundaries, but I could still feel Lila's thoughts like a distant radio. I could still edit them if I wanted. I didn't. I let her panic stay private, because private panic is dangerous. It makes people sloppy. We spent hours stabilizing the situation. I proposed freezing suspicious accounts, hiring a compliance firm, and openly announcing reforms before regulators forced our hand. Father resisted, because openness felt like weakness. I held my expression steady. "If you hide," I said, "you will look guilty even if you aren't. If you admit and correct, you look competent." Father's jaw worked. He hated being instructed. He also hated losing. Finally, he nodded once. "Do it," he said. The directors exhaled. Kieran stared at me like he was seeing an unfamiliar sister. When the meeting ended, Father stopped me at the doorway. "You saved us," he said quietly. The words landed awkwardly, like a gift wrapped in razor wire. I wanted to feel triumph. Instead, I felt tired. "I saved the foundation," I replied. "You can decide later whether you want to save the family." Father's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" I smiled, polite and dangerous. "It means stop letting guilt write your policies," I said, and walked away before he could answer. That evening in the mansion, Lila waited in the hallway outside my room. Her smile was gone. She looked small, but not harmless. "You're turning them," she said softly. The chorus flared at the edge of my mind as her thoughts began spilling without her permission. "She's stealing my life," Lila thought. "She's stealing my name. If she stays, I'll have to do something irreversible." The word irreversible prickled. I met her gaze, calm. "You still have a life," I said aloud. "Just not the one built on my absence." Lila's lips parted, and for a moment, her mask cracked into something human. Fear, grief, anger. Then it snapped back into strategy. "We can share," she said. Her inner voice confessed the truth. "I don't share." I felt the cursor rest on her thought again, like a hand hovering over a knife. I didn't want to hurt her. I wanted her to stop hurting everyone else. I edited one line, the smallest shift that would change the whole meaning. "We can share," her thought now whispered to the house. "If I stop lying." The words hung in the air. Lila's eyes widened. She hadn't meant to think that. Mother, passing by, froze in the corridor. Kieran appeared at the staircase, expression hard. Father's office door cracked open. In seconds, the hallway filled with silent witnesses. "Lila," Mother whispered. "What did you mean?" Lila looked at me as if I had pushed her off a cliff. "Rowan did something?" she blurted aloud, voice sharp. "She's manipulating enough," Father said, stepping out. His voice was cold, but there was something raw underneath. "All of you, in the study." The study smelled of books nobody read. Father stood near the desk like a judge. Mother sat rigidly on the sofa. Kieran leaned against the shelf, arms crossed. Lila stood in the center, breathing too fast. The chorus hummed, alive with tension. Father spoke first. "This family has heard too many thoughts without listening to what they mean," he said. "Lila, do you have something to tell us?" Lila's inner voice rose, panicked. "Say nothing," it thought. "Cry and blame." I could have edited her again. I chose not to. I watched her struggle. Lila's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Mother. "I'm scared," she said aloud. "I'm scared you'll abandon me." Her inner voice whispered, "If I cry, she'll hold me." Mother's face softened reflexively, then tightened as she realized the pattern. "We never said we'd abandon you," Mother said, voice shaking. "We said we'd find the truth." Kieran's voice cut in, bitter. "You've been using the chorus for years," he said. "All those times you accidentally thought something tragic when you wanted attention." Lila flinched. "That's not fair," she whispered. Father's gaze slid to me. "Rowan," he said. "What do you know about the chorus?" The room went still. If I admitted I could edit thoughts, they would treat me as a threat. If I lied, they would treat me as a liar. I chose a third option, partial truth. "I know it's not always honest," I said, "and I know we've been letting it decide things that should be decided with actions." Father's jaw tightened. "Are you saying Lila is lying?" "I'm saying," I replied, calm, "that we all hear what we want to hear. Lila's thoughts are designed to be heard. Mine were never given that luxury. If you want to judge us, judge what we do next." Silence stretched. The study's clock ticked like a metronome. Then Mother, finally, spoke the words that changed the room. "I want proof," she said, voice shaking but firm. "Not feelings, proof." Lila's face went pale. She had built her whole survival strategy on feelings. Proof was a language she didn't speak fluently. I exhaled slowly. "Then let's find it," I said, and in my chest, something tightened and loosened at the same time. I wasn't just fighting Lila anymore. I was building a new rule for this house. Truth must be earned. Proof doesn't appear by miracle. It appears by patience. The next month became a quiet war conducted through documents, phone calls, and old hospital archives. Father hired a legal team to investigate the birth swap without admitting it publicly. Mother visited the hospital's retired head nurse and came back with eyes red from crying and anger. Kieran, surprisingly, started helping me in small ways, sending me access codes, forwarding internal emails, warning me when directors tried to sideline my reforms. He didn't apologize. He didn't need to. His help was his apology translated into the only language he knew. Lila tried new tactics. She became generous in public, donating dresses to charity, smiling for cameras, accidentally thinking philanthropic vows that the chorus broadcasted beautifully. In private, her thoughts rotted. "If I lose them, I'm nothing," she thought. "I'll burn everything before I'm erased." The more threatened she felt, the louder her internal storms became, and the more the family began to notice the contradiction between her sweet words and her dark, desperate thoughts. The chorus, once her ally, became a spotlight she couldn't dim. One evening, a file arrived from the hospital's records department, a scan of a nursery log from 21 years ago, showing 2 newborn IDs, a correction scribbled in pen, and a signature that didn't match the nurse's usual handwriting. Father stared at it like it was a hostile takeover bid. Mother pressed a hand to her mouth. Kieran read it twice, then said softly, "So it's real." Lila stood at the doorway, listening, her face unreadable. Her inner voice whispered, "They're leaving me." Mother turned toward Lila, eyes wet. "You knew?" she asked. "Did you ever suspect?" Lila swallowed hard. "No," she said aloud. Then, without meaning to, her inner voice slipped through the chorus like a cracked seal. "I suspected," it whispered. "I found a letter in Father's drawer when I was 16. I kept it because it was leverage." The room went still. Mother's knees seemed to weaken. Father's face turned gray. Kieran's eyes narrowed with pure anger. "I didn't mean Lila," began aloud, but it was too late. The chorus had spoken a truth she had buried. For years, she had known she wasn't theirs, and had used that knowledge like a weapon, holding their guilt hostage. Father's voice was low and terrifyingly calm. "How long?" he asked. Lila's mouth trembled. "I was scared," she said. "I didn't want to lose you." Kieran laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You didn't want to lose your lifestyle," he said. Mother's tears fell silently. "All this time," she whispered, "you let me believe." Lila's eyes flashed with panic. "I'm still your daughter," she insisted. "I grew up here. I love you." Her inner voice begged, "Please don't throw me away." For the first time, I felt a true fork in the road. If the family rejected Lila completely, she might spiral into the irreversible she'd threatened. If they forgave her instantly, nothing would change, and I'd remain the outsider. The cursor in my mind hovered, waiting. I didn't edit her thoughts. I didn't need to. The truth was doing its own work now. Father exhaled slowly. "You are someone we raised," he said. Each word weighed. "But you are not the person you pretended to be." He looked at Mother, then at Kieran, then at me. "We will handle this without spectacle," he continued. "Lila will move to the guest house on the east side. She will have support, but she will not represent the Ashfords publicly, and she will not interfere with Rowan's role. This is not punishment. It is correction." Lila's face crumpled, the first real crack in her performance. "You're choosing her," she whispered. "We're choosing reality," Mother said, voice broken. Lila's inner voice screamed raw. "I hate her. I hate that she's calm. I hate that she came back." The chorus carried it, and the room flinched. Then Lila clapped a hand over her mouth as if she could stop her own mind. It didn't help. Later, after Lila was escorted to the guest house by a staff member who looked both apologetic and relieved, Mother came to my room. She stood in the doorway, hands trembling. "Rowan," she said softly. "I don't know how to undo what we did." I stared at her, the woman who had given birth to me and still didn't know me. "You can't undo it," I replied. "You can only stop doing it." Mother's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, once, as if the motion cost her pride. "Tell me," she whispered. "What do you need?" It was a simple question, and it hurt more than any insult because it was so late. I could have said money. I could have said apologies. I could have said love. Instead, I said the truth. "I need you to stop treating me like a debt," I said. "I'm not a bill you pay with gifts. I'm your daughter. Learn me." Mother pressed her lips together and nodded again. "I will," she whispered. For the first time, I believed she might. In the weeks that followed, the foundation reforms became official policy. Father announced compliance upgrades as a proactive move, and donors praised his leadership without realizing it had been my insistence. Kieran, still proud, started asking my opinions in meetings, then pretending it was his idea. I didn't mind. Progress doesn't require credit. It requires momentum. Lila stayed in the guest house, monitored gently. Sometimes her thoughts leaked through the chorus in faint bursts: regret, anger, fear, loneliness. Sometimes she sent messages asking to talk. I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't cruel. I was cautious. Forgiveness, I had learned, is not a gift you toss to someone who keeps dropping knives. On the day my name was added to the Foundation's board documents as an executive director, Father handed me a pen in his office. "Sign," he said. His voice was the same controlled tone he used for contracts. I signed anyway, because even cold recognition is recognition. When I finished, Father said, quietly, "You're stronger than I expected." I looked up. "I had to be," I replied. Father's gaze held something explaining itself. "We made you that way," he said. I nodded. Then don't waste it, I said. That evening, I walked through the mansion's silent halls and stopped in front of the family portrait. The plaque still read the Ashfords. The girl in the middle was still Lila. The frame had not been changed yet because rich families change slowly, like glaciers pretending they aren't moving. I raised my hand and touched the glass. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is fuel, but it burns out. I was something else now, awake. The chorus hummed faintly in the background of my mind, quieter than before, as if it had been waiting for this outcome. I didn't know how long I would be able to edit thoughts, or whether the ability would fade once the mission of survival, my own survival, was complete. But I knew one thing. I didn't need magic to keep my place anymore. I had competence. I had proof. I had the courage to be disliked. And somewhere on the east side of the property, Lila sat alone with her thoughts, learning the hardest lesson of all. When you build love on performance, the moment the performance cracks, you have to decide whether to become real or become nothing. I hoped, quietly, that she would choose real. Not for my sake, but for hers. Because even rivals deserve an ending that isn't a rooftop. The months after the investigation were quieter, which meant the real work finally began. Mother started inviting me to small things that didn't involve cameras. Afternoon tea with no guests, a walk in the greenhouse where she showed me plants she had kept alive for years. Because living things obey consistent care, not guilt. She asked me what music I liked, then listened without interrupting. She asked about my foster home, and when I told her, she didn't turn it into a tragedy she could cry over. She just held my hand and stayed present, which was harder than tears. Father remained stiff, but he stopped treating my presence like an inconvenience. He began sending me questions by email, short lines like directives, and I answered with the same crisp efficiency. Kieran invited me to lunch and, awkwardly, told me I had handled the gala like a pro. I replied that he had handled being wrong like a beginner, which made him choke on his water, and then, unexpectedly, laugh. The house's staff adjusted too. They began addressing me with the same respect they gave Lila, not because they were suddenly kind, but because hierarchy had changed, and people are quick learners when survival requires it. I didn't hold it against them. I had been a quick learner my whole life. The chorus still flared sometimes, usually when emotion spiked, but its influence was different now. People weren't treating it as sacred truth anymore. They were treating it as noise that might contain signal. That shift was the real victory. One morning, a junior staffer in the foundation office panicked because a donor threatened to withdraw funding after a rumor. Before I could speak, Kieran stepped in, asked for the facts, and refused to let drama steer the response. Later he admitted, quietly, that he had learned the skill from me. I pretended not to care, and he pretended he hadn't offered a compliment. That was our new sibling language. Bluntness wrapped around small loyalty. As for Lila, the guest house became a place of reluctant reflection. She began attending therapy sessions Father arranged, at first to prove she was trying, later because she discovered she couldn't stop hearing herself.